Hello, welcome to Ikate's Crossing. Okay, we're going to continue our exploration of James Redfield's Secret of Shambhala. We're still reading chapter 2, of course. This is part 2 with the Siddartha Tarot. What message do we have today? Three cards have pulled out. Very interesting. Okay, we've got the Two of Pentacles and the Ace of Pentacles with the Queen of Cups in this one here. So again, we have that sense of being aware of what we're juggling, feeling like we're maybe being pulled in different directions on some level. And so there's a sense of just being able to know the potential of the directions that we're moving into. It feels very much about knowing the potential of the directions, trusting your instincts, if you like, very much about being sensitive to your environment, being trusting your intuition, being sensitive to your empathic energies and how you're feeling and what's going on during this journey here. Super important. So you might feel yourself being pulled in different directions. If you can just sort of take a breath for a minute and allow yourself to remember the 10 insights so far. Remember to go through those 10 insights and think about where you are, your awareness, what you're radiating out, what you're noticing around you, your environment. Being able to be very aware of that is going to be very, very important through this journey here. Being able to know the potential of each direction that you're going to go in, and being very sensitive to your, just being very sensitive to that environment. Super important here. Okay, so where are we up to here? Okay. So this is it. So we're up to the Call of Shambhala, which is chapter 2, right? After bathing and changing clothes in the room Jampa had provided, I walked out into the back courtyard. Several monks were working in a vegetable garden as though the Chinese were of no concern. I looked out at the mountains and surveyed the sky. No helicopters anywhere. Would you like to sit on the bench up there? A voice spoke from behind me. I turned and saw Yin walking out of the door. I nodded and we walked up several terraces filled with ornamental plants and vegetables until we reached a sitting area facing an elaborate Buddhist shrine. A large mountain range framed the horizon behind us, but toward the south we had a panoramic view of the countryside for miles. Many people were walking on the roads or pulling carts. Where is the Lama? I asked. I don't know, Yin replied. He has not yet agreed to see you. Why not? Yin shook his head. I don't know. Do you think he knows where Will is? Again, Yin shook his head. Do you think the Chinese are still looking for us? I asked. Yin only shrugged, looking out into the distance. I'm sorry my energy is so bad, he said. Please don't let it influence you. It's just that my anger overwhelms me. Since 1954, the Chinese have systematically set out to destroy the Tibetan culture. Look at those people walking out there. Many of them are farmers who are displaced because of economic initiatives the Chinese have mandated. Others are nomads who are starving because these policies have interrupted their way of life. He clenched both fists. The Chinese are doing the same thing Stalin did in Manchuria, importing thousands of outsiders, in this case ethnic Chinese, into Tibet to change the cultural balance and institute Chinese ways. They demand that our schools teach only the Chinese language. The people outside the gates of the monastery, I asked, why do they come here? Lama Rigden and the monks are working to help the poor who are having the worst time with the transition of their culture. That is why the Chinese have left him alone. He helps solve the problems without agitating the populace against them. Yin said this in a way that reflected a mild resentment against the Lama, and immediately he apologized. No, he said. I didn't mean to imply the Lama is cooperating too much. It's just that when the Chinese are doing is despicable. He clenched his fists again and hit his knees. Many thought at first that the Chinese government would be respectful of Tibetan ways, that we could exist within the Chinese nation without losing everything. But the government is bent on destroying us. This is clear now, and we must begin to make it more difficult for them. You mean try to fight them? I asked. Yin, you know you can't win that. I know, he said. I just get so angry when I think of what they're doing. Someday the warriors of Shambhala will ride out and defeat these monsters of evil. What? It is a prophecy among my people. He looked at me and shook his head. I know. I must work on my anger. It collapses my prayer field. Abruptly he stood up and added, I'll go ask Jumper if he has talked with the Lama. Please excuse me. He bowed slightly and left. For a while I looked out at the Tibetan landscape, trying to comprehend fully the damage the Chinese occupation had done. At one point I even thought I heard another helicopter, but it was too far away to be sure. I knew Yin's anger was justified, and I thought for several more minutes about the realities of the political situation in Tibet. The thought of asking for a phone came back to mind, and I wondered how hard it would be to place an international call. I was about to get up and head back inside when I realized I felt tired, so I took a couple of deep breaths and tried to focus on the beauty around me. The snow-capped mountains and the green and brown colours of the landscape were stark and beautiful. The sky was a rich blue with only a few clouds along the western horizon. As I gazed out, I noticed that the two monks were several tiers down below me, were staring intently up in my direction. I glanced behind me to see if something was up there, but I could see nothing unusual. I smiled back in their direction. After a few minutes, one of them walked up the stone steps towards me, carrying a basket full of hand tools. When he reached me, he nodded politely and began to weed a bed of flowers 20 feet to my right. Several minutes later, he was joined by another monk, who began digging as well. Occasionally, they would look over at me with inquiring eyes and deferential nods. I took more deep breaths and focused on the far distance again, thinking about what Yin had said concerning his prayer field. He was worried that his anger against the Chinese collapsed his energy. What did he mean by that? Suddenly I began to feel the warmth of the sun and to sense its radiance more consciously, feeling a certain peacefulness I hadn't felt since coming here. I took another breath with my eyes closed and perceived something else, an unusually sweet fragrance like a bouquet of flowers. My first thought was that the monks had clipped some of the blooms off the plants they were working on and had placed them near me. I opened my eyes and looked, but there were no flowers close by. I felt for a breeze that might have blown the fragrance over towards me, but there was none stirring. I noticed the monks had dropped their tools and were staring intensely at me with wide eyes, and their mouths half open as though they'd seen something strange. Again I looked behind me, trying to figure out what was going on. Upon noticing that they had disturbed me, they quickly gathered up their tools and baskets and almost ran down the path towards the monastery. I followed them with my eyes for a moment, watching their red robes flip and sway as they glanced back at me to see if I was watching. As soon as I walked down and entered the monastery, I knew something was abuzz. The monks were all scurrying about and whispering to one another. I walked down a hallway and into my own room, planning on using Jumper for the use of a phone. My mood was better, but I was again questioning my own sense of self-preservation. I was being drawn further into what was happening here, instead of trying to get out of this country. Who knew what the Chinese might do if I was caught? Did they know my name? It might even be too late to leave by air. I was about to get up and look for Jumper when he burst into the room. The Lama has agreed to see you, he said. This is a great honour. Don't worry, he speaks perfect English. I nodded, feeling a little nervous. Jumper was standing at the door looking expectant. I'm to escort you now, he said. I got up and followed as Jumper led me through a very large room with high ceilings and into a smaller room on the other side. 5 or 6 monks holding prayer wheels and white scarves watched with anticipation as we walked up towards the front and sat down. Yin waved from the far corner. This is the greeting room, Jumper said. The interior of the room was wooden and painted with light blue handcrafted murals and mandalas adorned the walls. We waited for a few minutes and then the Lama entered. He was taller than most of the other monks, but was dressed in a red robe exactly like the ones they wore. After looking at everyone in the room very deliberately, he summoned Jumper forward. They touched foreheads and he whispered something in Jumper's ear. Jumper immediately turned and gestured to all the other monks to follow him out of the room. Yin, too, began to leave, but as he did, he glanced at me and nodded slightly, a gesture I took as support for my impending conversation. Many of the monks handed me their scarves and nodded excitedly. When the room was empty, the Lama motioned for me to come forward and sit in a tiny straight-back chair to his right. I bowed slightly as I came up and sat down. "Thank you for seeing me," I said. He nodded and smiled, and looking me over for a long time. "Could I ask you about my friend, Wilson James?" I finally inquired. "Do you know where he is?" "What is your understanding of Shambhala?" the Lama asked in return. "I guess I always thought of it as an imaginary place, a fantasy, like Shangri-La." He cocked his head and replied matter-of-factly, "It is a real place on earth that exists as part of the human community." Why has no one ever discovered where it is? And why do so many prominent Buddhists speak of Shambhala as a way of life and a mentality? Because Shambhala does represent a way of being and living. It can be spoken of accurately in that manner, but is also an actual location where real people have achieved this way of being in community with each other. Have you been there? No, I have not yet been called. Then how can you be so sure? Because I've dreamed of Shambhala many times, as have many other adepts on the earth. We compare our dreams and they are so similar. We know this must be a real place, and we hold the sacred knowledge, the legends that explain our relationship to the sacred community. What is that relationship? We are to preserve the knowledge while we are waiting for the time when Shambhala will come out and make itself known to all peoples. Yin told me that some believe that the warriors of Shambhala will eventually arrive to defeat the Chinese. Yin's anger is very dangerous for him. He's wrong then. He is speaking from the human viewpoint that sees defeat in terms of war and physical fighting. Exactly how this prophecy will come true is still unknown. We will have to first understand Shambhala, but we know that this will be a different kind of battle. I found the last statement cryptic, but his manner was so compassionate that I felt awe rather than confusion. We believe, Lama Rigdon continued, that the time when the way of Shambhala will be known in the world is very close. Lama, how do you know this? Again, because of our dreams. Your friend Will has been here, as you undoubtedly have already heard. This we took as a great sign, because we had earlier dreamed of him. He has smelt the fragrance and heard the utterance. I was taken back. What kind of fragrance? He smiled. The one you yourself smelt earlier today. Now everything made sense. The way the monks had reacted and the Lama's decision to see me. You are also being called, he added. The sending of the fragrance is a rare thing. I've seen it occur only twice. Once when I was with my teacher, and again when your friend Will was here. Now it has happened again with you. I had not known whether to see you or not. It is very dangerous to speak of these things trivially. Have you also heard the cry? No, I said. I don't understand what that is. It is also a call from Shambhala. Just keep listening for a special sound. When you hear it, you will know what it is. Lama, I'm not sure I want to go anywhere. It seems very dangerous here for me. The Chinese seem to know who I am. I think I want to go back to the United States as soon as possible. Can you tell me where I might find Will? Is he somewhere close? The Lama shook his head, looking very sad. No, I'm afraid he is committed to go on. I was silent, and for a long moment the Lama just looked at me. There is something else you must know, he said. It is very clear from the dreams that without you, Will could not survive this attempt. For him to succeed, you will have to be there as well. A wave of fear ran through me, and I looked away. This was not what I wanted to hear. The legends say, the Lama went on, that in Shambhala, each generation has a certain destiny that is publicly known and talked about. The same is true in human cultures outside of Shambhala. Sometimes great strength and clarity can be gained by looking at the courage and intent of the generation that came before us. I wondered where he was going with this. Is your father alive? He asked. I shook my head. He died a couple of years ago. Did he serve in the Great War of the 1940s? Yes, I replied, he did. Was he in the fighting? Yes, during most of the war. Did he tell you of his most fearful situation? His question took me back to the discussions with my father during my youth. I thought for a moment. Probably the landing in Normandy in 1944 at Omaha Beach. Ah, yes, the Lama said. I've seen your American movies about this landing. Have you seen them? Yes, I have, I asked. I said, yes, I have, I said. They moved me very much. They told of the soldiers' fear and courage, he went on. Yes. Do you think you could have done such things? I don't know. I don't see how they did it. Perhaps it was easier for them because it was the calling for a whole generation. On some level they all sensed it. The ones who fought, the ones who made the arms, the ones who provided the food. They saved the world at a time of its greatest peril. He waited as though he expected me to ask a question. But I just looked at him. The calling of your generation is different, he said. You too must save the world, but you must do so in a different way. You must understand that inside you is a great power that can be cultivated and extended, a mental energy that has always been called prayer. So I've been told, I said, but I guess I still don't know how to use it. To this he smiled and stood up, looking at me with a twinkle in his eye. Yes, he said, I know, but you will. You will. Okay, that's it for me for today. Don't forget to check the links down below. Check the links on my channel. Like, subscribe and ring the bell so you know when the next video will be uploaded. Take care and blessed be.